Good morning to you. It is Saturdays with Sherry, and I am so excited about the topic today because we are people of light and we expose darkness. And with me today are two of my dear friends who I admire so much. They're with Redeeming Zoe. If you don't already know them, I want you to meet Hillary Evans and Becca Haskell. Good morning.
Good morning.
I love these Texas-Tennessee connections. I was so glad to have you guys up here a few weeks ago. It was just so much fun. And I love you and appreciate you so much. But we have listeners from 9 different continents, multiple states who will listen live or watch the playback. So I want them to know how wonderful each of you are individually, because as women in leadership, it helps if we kind of know something about who we're visiting with. So y'all just tell the rest of the world how awesome you are.
You can start. You want me to go first? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm Hillary Evans, and I am one of the co-founders of Redeeming Zoe. So for me, I am the type of person that loves to learn. I love to read. I love to watch movies that are informative, just about random topics. I just love to learn. I'm a lifelong learner. So a lot of my friends will say like, oh, you don't really have that many hobbies. And I kind of laugh because it's like, no, I love to read. I love to write. I love doing all the things. And so here recently, I have learned that I really enjoy just sitting where there's a body of water and just taking in fresh air. That is a hobby of mine. But aside from that, I also love to play guitar. I love to sing. And I love to drink coffee with friends.
With the coffee mug from the Fainting Goat in Tennessee, which I so love. When I first saw it, I was like, is that? That's great. I understand being a lifelong learner. I enjoy it. I like to write. I like to read. I like the bodies of water. I keep trying to figure out how I can live by a body of water that I have to take care of the yard work with it. I believe God will give me the desire of my heart at some point with that. All right. That is awesome, Hillary. Becca, beautiful Becca, what's going on?
Well, one of my favorite things is not drinking coffee.
I've been trying to get her to convert, but
I was shocked, but that's okay.
But I love the outdoors. I'm so excited that it's springtime here in Texas, and anytime I get the opportunity, I love to be outside. I love to put my hammock up in some trees somewhere and just relax and take a nap in my hammock. And I also am very passionate and love to spend my time using my gift of photography. And so it is something, if I have a stressful day, like I just love to go and document things outside, or my personal favorite is like just documenting subjects and portraiture. And so anytime that I'm outside and I have a camera in my hand, it's a good day in my book. So yeah.
You're a wonderful photographer, and I love the fact that you have a hammock handy. So that is just really awesome. Y'all are just amazing to me. I will forever have a special place in my heart for you. Mm-hmm. And so there's the little personal. Tell us about Redeeming Zoe. For people that do not know, how did it get to the point that it is today? What's going on?
Yeah. Oh, I'll start. Yeah. Well, Hillary and I first met in college a little over 10 years ago now. And we joked from the beginning of our friendship that we would start a nonprofit. And it was purely a joke. It's just we knew we had a lot of similar interests and that we had traveled internationally for ministry. And so we just joked about it, having no thought that it would ever become something that's reality. And so in 2013, we had the opportunity to go and work for a ministry that ran an orphanage in the Philippines. And it was through that experience that opened our eyes to so much more. So Redeeming Zoe kind of birthed out of seeing need in a different area. So working in the orphanage system, we just saw a repeated cycle of abuse that was never going to end. I mean, it's just kids were coming in our home that just over and over again had the same story. And so we are passionate about stopping that storyline of abuse to protect the next generation where they don't know a storyline of abuse. So we focus on awareness and prevention of child exploitation.
Yeah, and I'll say, Sherry, to add to that, you know, a lot of the organizations that we came in contact with in the Philippines were focused on aftercare.
Mm-hmm.
So there weren't a lot of organizations kind of focusing on the front end. And so we kind of wanted to take that proactive approach rather than kind of the reactive side of things.
Okay, and I think that's so important because, you know, we see that in all areas of life, whether it's jail ministry, education, literacy. If you will get it on the front end, it makes such a difference. So I'm hearing how Redeeming Zoe evolved, how it happened in the Philippines, how it is preventative, but I think that is sparking the curiosity of our listeners. Okay, so we talk about prevention, but, you know, I even said in the description, boy, you put these two words together, and for some people, it almost sucks the air out of the room because they're like, are we really getting ready to talk about this? We are. And so I guess the first thing, you know, as we just step into this is, what are lessons you learned in the Philippines about preventing sex trafficking and knowing that you're aggressively putting things in place in multiple states here in the U.S.? What does that look like? What were lessons that you learned? And then we're going to dig down further for our viewers, which welcome, about how can we prevent this? How can we recognize some of these signs? Because I'll be honest, even when I was hanging out with you gals, you would say something and I would think, that's a warning sign. And I mean, I've been trained in this stuff, and yet you live it so much that you're seeing it in a way that maybe moms and dads and sweet little churchgoers that have not been exposed to this, or that may see it and don't even recognize it. Help us know what you've learned and how we can put some of these things in place.
Mm-hmm. So I'll kind of start with that. You know, prevention, when you hear the word prevention, it's exciting and you want to be on the front end. And that's, you know, we had kind of these rose-colored glasses in the beginning of like, we're going to prevent and it's going to save children and it's going to be awesome. But the reality is unfortunately, prevention is really hard to measure. And so you really have to kind of keep a mindset of one child at a time. You know, if it's one child that's being able to speak out against this, it's worth it. And so a lot of our goals have kind of been to target the systems around the child. So working with teachers, working with churches, working with parents, and also in addition to working with the child. But I will say a lot of the things that we saw in the Philippines, they do translate into the States, but there are also some very different signs as well. So that, and we're kind of, because we're in the States now, whereas we've been in the Philippines for 5 years, we're having to also do more research. And so that's where we're at, is learning what that looks like here in the States as well. Some of the research that we've done, show that, you know, this is from a .gov website, but some of the signs are people who appear malnourished, showing signs of physical injuries, avoiding eye contact or social interaction with authority figures, law enforcement. That's a huge one, especially like in airports. You know, if they don't have their own personal documentation and someone else is holding it for them. Lacking official documentation, working long hours and not getting a break, living at their place of employment. Those are some things. Checking into hotels with older males and referring to them as daddy. That is, you know, so, but I will say for us, and I encourage others, be willing to look at these things, even though it's uncomfortable. It's not fun to talk about, but it's there. And so if we stick our heads in the sand and just go about our way, I mean, you know, you have the opportunity to pay attention and to make reports and to do your part. Everyone has a part to play.
Yes. Okay. Now you said something so valuable. Be willing to face it, even if it's uncomfortable. And so, in one of our conversations that we had when you all were in Tennessee, you talked about the grooming that goes on before kids really even enter the whole sex trafficking route. And we're talking about young children, 7, 8, 9, girls and boys. And it almost caught me off guard to hear that there were different phases and stages here in the States. So for the parents, would you talk to them about the internet, who they're around, who could possibly be grooming? Are they strangers? Are they friends? Why is this such a big deal between Texas and Tennessee on the interstate? I mean, it is crazy. And I know I've just thrown out a bucket load of questions, but I also want to make a comment. I was at the hairdresser the other day, and she was telling me of a situation that happened. Someone came in, and they were pretty forceful in wanting this basically 12-year-old to get their hair colored right then. And there was an off-duty fireman sitting in her chair, and so they navigated this situation, but he was like, it has to be colored now. And she was like, I can't do that. She was of a different ethnicity that this particular stylist really didn't know how to work with her hair. And so she referred her somewhere else. But, you know, everyone was just sick when they left because it seemed so urgent that the child have a change of hair color immediately. And so, you know, even for people that are hairdressers, there are things to watch for. Like you said, the looking down, and they even followed up with the salon that they sent the person to. They were very forceful about getting it changed, and then when they couldn't in the time frame they wanted, it was like they were gone. Wow. And the girl even admitted to being from out of state. And I was in a really small town, basically, when this happened. But it was a town right off the interstate, off of I-65. So it is very real. So just talk to us about how we shore up recognizing this and what we can do to help prevent this from happening to children and young girls that we love and complete strangers. I mean, this is kind of unnerving. Yeah,
right. I think the beginning step is one of the things that Hillary and I say regularly is trust your gut. If you feel uncomfortable and there is a situation that makes you feel uncomfortable and makes you question like what's going on, we've learned it's not our job to investigate. There are professionals that have skills. So if there's ever a situation where you feel uncomfortable, where you feel that something is just fishy, something is not right, always don't be afraid to report something in an instance where it's just in that situation, it is very concerning. And that is a sign of someone wanting to instantly change a child's hair color. And the manic behavior more so can be a concern. Right. In the way that you described it is how I'm perceiving it as kind of manic. But I think it's just really important in this day and age to not be afraid to report. If there is ever a situation where you feel uncomfortable, it's not our job to investigate. It's not our job to, I don't know if that's really happening. Maybe I shouldn't.
And we can include some hotlines in the chat box after this is over, so that, if you're ever in a position, just put it in your phone. I've got it plugged in my phone, and I don't ever hesitate if I see something or notice something that kind of catches me, off guard. Oh, that needs to be reported. I can't tell you how many times in the last month I've been on the phone with CPS.
Yep.
Just because I had an inkling and there were some signs that, that's not right. I'm going to report it. And
okay, so how do we recognize these signs, especially when you were talking about the people that step in to kind of pre-groom before kids take a step?
So with grooming, you have to understand, without being suspicious of everyone, you have to understand that grooming is a long process. It's not just something that's going to happen overnight. And so I think the first and foremost important thing is, yes, we're going to talk to you about the signs, but also talk to your children, or talk to younger girls or boys that you feel like you're close with, and just say, if anyone ever does anything to you in this sense, if anyone ever touches you in a confusing way, if anyone ever says something that makes you feel uncomfortable or kind of weird inside, please tell someone. Tell a safe adult, so that adults can then go and report to the appropriate authorities. As far as warning signs with grooming, gifts are a huge thing. Buying kids gifts, and not allowing kids to have boundaries. So like if an individual is maybe like tickling a child, or, and these are just general, this isn't necessarily grooming for trafficking. This is just generalized grooming. And which I think some of the research that I've done, they're actually trying to do away with the word grooming and go into just actual like manipulation is what they're calling it. But the tickling, and then the kid saying no, and then the person not stopping, or let's say, an adult telling a child, like, you're my best friend. Like, if that adult doesn't have friendships outside of that, or outside of younger kids or teenagers, that is something to watch for. For trafficking, we've seen cases that have kind of, there's been what's called a Romeo pimp. And a Romeo pimp is someone who like pretends to be the boyfriend and just falls in love very quickly, and does anything and everything that the girl wants. And then over time, it becomes more manipulation and trying to isolate that individual from their family or their support system.
And psychological abuse.
Psychological abuse is a huge factor. So anytime isolation is involved, there should be concern, because darkness loves isolation, and that's kind of how I see it. Darkness loves isolation. It loves to be alone. It doesn't like people involved who are a part of the light. So I would also say, there's a lot of stuff, and I really want to hone in on this. There is a lot out there on Facebook that may or may not be reputable. So really check your sources. The stories about going into Target and somebody following. I'm not saying that that's not real, and I'm not saying that's not sketchy, but that's not always the case for trafficking. So I honestly would recommend researching and watching films that maybe were done by trafficking anti-trafficking organizations that are in the work nonstop. Some of them that we have seen are nefarious. I do believe you can access that on Amazon Prime.
Yes.
I Am Jane Doe is on Netflix.
It's a documentary.
It's a documentary. Tricked is on Netflix. Another one is What Happened to the Girl Next Door.
Please put all of these in the chat.
I can put those in the chat for sure. I recently so I'm getting my master's in social work right now. And I recently took a class on human trafficking, and we read The Slave Next Door, and it's all about trafficking in America, and how it really does look different than in these developing nations that, it's not necessarily brothels that you're seeing.
It's subtle here.
It's very subtle.
It is so subtle here that we think in some cases, oh, isn't that sweet that they're doting on that child? Or, oh, isn't this great that person wants to be involved in my kid's life? When that, to some degree, should be a red flag unless you know that person very well. And even when you know that person very well, to set boundaries, because so many times it looks like the trafficking even happens through people that kids know.
Yes, very much so.
Well, I will say that,
manipulated.
right. I will say that 91% of abuse cases happen by someone they know.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's not this abduction kind of picture.
Yeah, it's not like
stranger.
the movie Taken.
No.
Like, it's not like, maybe that's why our perception was like 10, 20 years ago. But that's not what it has become today. It's so much more than that. Not saying that that still doesn't happen, but it definitely looks a lot different today.
Okay, so as our viewers are listening, what if there's a mom, dad, a relative that's already concerned about their children acting more isolated, or maybe they've got friends on the internet that they're suspect of and they're not sure how to turn this around because every time they talk to their child, their kids get defensive and all of a sudden it's like they're the bad guy, and yet they see this course almost beginning to develop. How do we help parents navigate this if there are the beginning signs of isolation or someone that is doting on their child in a way that sends up a flag and yet they can't figure out why?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I would say if they notice that isolation is happening, I would talk to the child. I would be willing to have the hard conversations, but not in a way that is punitive or defensive. I would really, honestly sit down with them and just ask questions. You know, maybe seem interested.
Yeah.
You know, even though you may feel that there's ulterior motives to this relationship, you know, seem interested for the benefit of getting the child to realize what's going on.
As a parent, you could be very anxious, but those open-ended questions that are non-judgmental, that are really trying to find the information, you know, you're going to have to show some restraint and not just go off in order to help redeem your child.
Right.
Yes.
You know, I think that if this were a regular conversation with the family regularly, you know, kids would be more aware, and then they would know the signs ahead of time. And I think that's the perfect solution, is to have these conversations before any of that were to take place.
And to have conversations at multiple stage levels of the child's development.
Yes.
Like, start having conversations at a super young age, like as a toddler, and even like as the child progresses, like safe touch, unsafe touch, confusing touch. Like, start having those conversations with your child as soon as they understand and can have a conversation.
Yeah, I think the more you teach your children about consent, that's going to put you far ahead of the game. But if you're already in that situation, I just want to, if you're already in it.
Stop you real quick. Two things you said I want our viewers to hear. We used to only say good touch, bad touch, but I hear you saying confusing touch.
Yeah.
Okay, that gives a child permission to say, I can't tell you why I don't like this. It makes me uncomfortable. I love the fact that confusing touch is an option for kids. And if you're not using that, parents, loved ones, you should be. So that they can, because sometimes kids don't know how to put their feelings in a word. Love the confusing touch. The other C word, I thought, okay, this is great. Consent. You know, maybe they don't like being tickled, and if they don't, and if it's uncomfortable, they should be able to say, I didn't give you permission to do that. Stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's okay for kids to say that, even if it's their parent.
Yes.
Yes. And I will say on the, you mentioned good touch, bad touch. We try to say safe touch and unsafe touch because good and bad can kind of give this picture of, that they're bad.
Yes.
And so we want to refrain from, the safe and unsafe really highlights, we teach kids, anywhere where a bathing suit doesn't cover, that is and someone touches you there, that's an unsafe touch, and you need to tell a safe adult. Because then we talk about how and who those safe adults are that they can go and talk to.
Okay, so viewers, did you hear that? I love it. Safe touch, unsafe touch, confusing touch. These are valuable tools for you to talk to any child about it of any age. So please, level up, have the difficult conversation. You got this because you have no idea how it will help your child's future. This is such great stuff, ladies.
Thank you. It's very important to us. And, I think with this next generation coming in, we live in a day and age where social media has just taken over, and, predators are out there on social media pretending to be somebody that they're not, and luring children into really dark situations.
And I think it's also important to understand that we can no longer parent children the way that we were parented, because the world is not the same it was 20, 30 years ago. Like, it's not. And so we can't just say, like, okay, go outside and come back when the street light comes on. Like, you can't just do that anymore. And so we live in a different age now where it's so important to know the signs. It's so important to have open communication with your child. And it's important to be involved. I was reading yesterday a statistic that said spending 15 minutes a day with your child can change the relationship between a parent and child. 15 minutes a day where you have personal connection with your child or children.
That's less time than a walk. That's less time than a 30-minute sitcom. That's less time than it takes to heat something up in an oven. And to be honest, here in Nashville, that's less time than it takes to go through a drive-through. We have got to get our priorities lined up. And I love what you said, Becca, about it's not how it was. We have got to monitor the internet, who their friends are, not only their face-to-face friends, their connections at school, on the soccer field, but especially on the internet, because even as adults, my gracious, the friend requests I get from people that I know are bogus. Even on LinkedIn, I'm getting to the point that I'm almost surprised. I look at the year of the birth or the email address doesn't match. And I'm like, oh, what a scam. Okay, but our children may not be savvy in that unless we tell them. They should not be befriending someone that they do not know or that their parents don't know. So tighten up on those, permission requests that you're granting parents. Okay, so what are some other things that you would want parents, grandparents, people to know that they're like, I want to make a difference. How do I do that?
First, I would say, find local organizations within where you are, and volunteer for a day or see what volunteering looks like for you. If that's not something you're able to do, find ways that you can donate, not just monetary gifts, but there are I know that a lot of local child advocacy centers around the U.S., they have opportunities for you to give teddy bears or blankets that they give the kids when they do when they have to come in for forensic interviews. Talk to your local child protective services and see how you can help within the foster care system. It's a large system, and there's plenty of ways to get involved.
Yes.
So
these are great ways. All right, so we've talked about some pretty serious stuff. How do we give people hope? They're like, oh my goodness, this is weightier than I expected. I got a text just now, and they're like, oh, Wow. So, there is hope. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yes. So I think the biggest challenge with our work is you can't measure prevention. And so we just have to believe in the work that we do and have faith in the work that we do. And so through this, I just think education and awareness is the hope that we can change the future for these children. And giving them the tools to help protect themselves, to help them have a voice, to empower these children that they can say no, that they can tell a trusted adult. Just giving them the tools to help them be successful in protecting themselves, and us as adults, doing all that we can to also protect these children when they don't fully understand the situations that they may be in. And so I think it's very important that if this is something we're passionate about, don't just listen to us talk. Please be active and advocate for those children in your life, whether they're your personal children, whether they're grandchildren, whether they're children in your ministry. Take time to educate yourself on the signs. Take time to report when you see those signs and you have that gut feeling that really makes you question. These children are the next generation of leaders. They're the next generation of every position in the world. And we can do everything we can to help protect them so that they can be successful, thriving adults.
And I'll say, I want to add on to that. I think it's important to remember that, it is not up to the children to protect themselves. We want to give them tools so that if they are in a situation, they can get out or they can go to a safe adult to be protected. It is our job to protect this next generation.
Yes.
So that's kind of
such great stuff. I'm still thinking about the safe, unsafe touch, the confusing touch, consent, 15 minutes a day. My gracious, you all have shared so many practical things. Being aware of who your children are around, even when they're familiar people. It is okay for your child to stay in the same room with you. There are boundaries that we can set, and people are like, well, that's just being hypersensitive. No, it's being a good steward of the very children that you were entrusted to raise. And the same is true with the social devices. It is fine to put them away at dinner and beyond. Life will go on. And family time will be better for it. Okay, so I know as people have listened, they're like, but we want to help you all. So tell our viewers and listeners, how can they work with you gals with Redeeming Zoe? How do we find you on social media? How do we connect with you?
So we do have a Facebook page, we have Instagram, and we have YouTube. So you can see some of our videos that we've made from our work in the Philippines. We are venturing into starting programs here in the United States. We're starting with small communities. And so we are looking at some evidence-based curriculum and looking to provide resources for public schools, for teachers, and for children. But also we are looking to train churches. So if you want to be a part of hosting a training, you can donate monetarily on our website. It's very easy. We have a curriculum that is $2.25 per kid for the license. And so we are looking to purchase that curriculum very soon. So if you want to be a part of giving towards that, that would be awesome. But we also have merchandise that is on our website as well that you can purchase and support our organization through visually wearing the vision of Redeeming Zoe.
Yes, wearing the merch is good. $2.50. You can't go through a drive-through. You can't get Starbucks. I mean, when you think about it, my goodness, you could buy the curriculum for 2 to 3 kids for what you could a cup of coffee.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. And I want to add to the hope. I really just feel very compelled to say this, Sherry. You know, I think the anchor for our soul is Jesus, you know, and that's the hope that we have. It is the only solid foundation that we have, and our hope lies in him. And so I know that we live in a very broken world, but at the same time, I know that God promises his people, those who love him, to work all things together for good. And so if it's not good yet, God's not done. So that's kind
that is so great. If it's not good yet, God is not. Hillary and Becca, thank you for your time. I look forward to the resources in the chat. I know people are going to want to watch these things, to connect with you, personally support your ministry. I think everyone should, because I think it saves lives. Physically, mentally, emotionally. I applaud what you're doing. I bless you with great favor as you expand into the schools and churches and training. We look forward to hearing more about what you all do, and I thank you for your time. And so for those of you that are thinking, well, what's next? What's next is Food for Thought on Wednesday. It's a time when we look at biblical principles in business and how, as women in leadership, we move and live and have our being in a really great way. Sorry about that. I need more water. Okay, girls, go forth and conquer. We'll touch base again soon. For everyone else, have a really great Saturday. Make the difference by thinking less of yourself, more of others. And I think that's time for me to say bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry.
Thanks, ladies.